recognized that parts of this department were broken, and I brought attention to that several years ago. But I did not abandon this department then, and I will not abandon this department now. History is being written now, and I'm determined to make sure that we are on the right side of history. Thank you.
As far as questions go, we'll spend the first 5 or so minutes taking questions from our local media first, and then we'll turn it over to the rest of the group. So if you have a question, go raise your hand. We'll call on you. The shouting stuff is going to be very confusing. So questions from the local media start. Eric.
Yes, sir.
Chief, you have 9 city council members who are saying defund police. Do you think your response today is enough to quash those calls? What do you say about the defund police movement in the city?
As chief, I'm obligated to ensuring the public safety of our 400,000 plus residents. I will not abandon that. Our elected officials certainly can engage in those conversations, but until there is a robust plan that reassures the safety of our residents, I will not leave them. I will not leave them behind. Yes, sir.
Chief Paul Bloom,
yes, sir.
Fox 9 News. Nice to see you this morning.
Good to see you.
I know you spoke about withdrawing from union negotiations. Putting you on the spot here, do you think the union president, Bob Kroll, needs to step aside? Could that help you reach a labor deal that you'd be happy with and the city would be satisfied with?
I've had and continue to have very intentional conversations with Lieutenant Kroll, and what I believe is the best pathway to move forward for the city, for this department. And while I won't go into the details, I believe he knows that from my position, these are very serious conversations, and there are going to have to be some decisions made moving forward. And so I will just say that I've been engaged in those conversations with him. I believe he clearly knows my position, and I will continue to have those conversations with him.
Susie.
Do you believe that Bob Kroll is willing to change and willing to be a part of the solution?
I care deeply about the city, and I care deeply about the men and women, our sworn and civilian on this department. We have to look into our hearts, what's in our best interests, and so I hope that he will do the same.
Please.
Yeah, Chief, you said you're not going to abandon the people of Minneapolis. You know, I've heard from some rank and file officers who are very disappointed here. What assurance do you have that there isn't going to be a slowdown or people aren't going to have their calls answered in response to the Minneapolis City Council or to your own efforts at reform?
There's no doubt that what our city has experienced over the past 2 weeks has been traumatic for not only our residents, but certainly our men and women on this department. That is it's the reality. So I have to make sure that they have spaces to heal as well. But I will tell you, I've had conversations over the past couple of weeks, and through all of these challenging dynamics, they continue to show up. And I've said before that hope is here. And I've seen it played out in our cities. I've seen it play out with neighbors banding together to help clean up around their shop areas, to look out after one another. But I've seen it with the spirit and the character of the men and women on this department who continue to keep showing up. What they're experiencing is real, absolutely. But I believe that we will continue to move forward, and we'll move forward in collaboration with our community.
Chief, you talked about racism and how we have to attack it head on in order to deal with a lot of the problems that exist within MPD. Can you talk about your personal battles with racism inside of the department and what you've had to deal with coming up the ranks of MPD?
Yes, this is a 152-year-old department. With it, it has its culture. Some of that culture is good. Some of that culture is grounded in our American experience. And race is connected to that, undoubtedly. My experience was bringing attention to some of those systemic issues that race can have barriers in terms of promotion, hiring, retention, and just the environment for all people within this organization to feel that they can succeed and be supported. And so I have a lens very different and unique from others, and so I will lean on that lens to make sure that I'm doing everything I can so that we can eradicate some of these same barriers that I had to experience several years ago. And that by the way, that people of color in this department and women are experiencing. And so I will be continued to lean in and use that lens that I have to seek the changes that are needed. But also, I want to just make this very clear. American policing in this nation, we have to address the race issue head on. We are the visible, most first face of government in our communities, and our communities are crying out. And they've been doing it certainly with Mr. Floyd's death, but decades before that. We must do better. We have to do better. And so we have an opportunity not only to change how we do business in terms of being peacekeepers in Minneapolis, but across this nation. And I do believe, and I've been talking over the course of the several weeks with my peers, with major city chiefs, I believe that the will is there, both from a legislative standpoint, but also all of our chiefs across the country. We know that the time is now. And it would be the greatest disservice in policing if we did not use the will and the energy and the inspiration to make some significant changes nationwide as it relates to race and policing.
Lou.
Chief, in your remarks, you mentioned the use of real-time data to intervene with problematic officers or interactions. Can you go more into detail of what that means and what the community would expect that to mean when these problems arise out in the public?
Yes. So what I can tell you is we've been very fortunate to bring on Benchmark Analytics, which is a national company that expertise and specializes in this. For decades, the traditional model has been that a supervisor is the one to try to stay on top of a problematic employee or look at areas of concern in terms of performance. But we know that employees can change assignments during their careers. We know that supervisors can change assignment. And if we do not have a very systematic, robust way through data of tracking that, no matter where the trajectory of that employee goes or that supervisor, we're going to have problems, and we're not going to see it. I know that there have been questions raised about when an incident occurs, well, Chief Rondo, how come you didn't know about this person's number of complaints and what have you? We need to reevaluate that. We need to do it with real-time data. We as an organization need to evolve and use technology to our advantage. And by the way, it doesn't have to wait for every 30 days for an employee review or every year. We are able to do this now with real-time data, so I'm very excited about that being introduced into our organization.
We'll open it up now to full group. Yes, please.
Chief, you had previously said that in your view, the three other officers besides Chauvin that were involved in this case were complicit in George Floyd's death. Attorneys for at least two of the other officers have said that they were rookie cops and that they were following Chauvin's lead. What's your response to that?
The policies that I put out for our department, those policies are not guided in years of service. I don't put policies out to say that you should only react or respond if you're a 2-year member or a 5-year member or a 10-year member. And if policies or subculture get in the way, then I expect and I demand one's humanity to rise above that. And so that is my answer for that.
Please.
About those rookie cops, they were just a few shifts into the job. The only thing they really had to rely on is their training. Does it show that the training here is failing?
What I observed, and I want to be very just mindful that obviously this case is under investigation, but what I observed was not training that I ever participated in, none that I observed other officers participating in. And so, again, I will go back to when I helped craft the duty to intervene and duty to report back in 2016. It does not signify if you have 2 days on or 20 years on. We expect you to, whether it's verbally or physically, to call up for help. and to intervene. Mr. Floyd, at the very least, was expecting that.
Is being